All right, Jamie, we're ready to get started whenever.
Okay. All right, so, and you guys have done this before, but I really am a believer. Okay, let me back up. I'm just trying to give you some background. So I teach here at this building, so I teach 8th and 9th grade in the high school, so I don't really teach beginners every day. So I kind of talk to my people that teach beginners, and I teach lessons to kids, and I work with them as 8th graders, but I don't have the nitty gritty stuff. So the stuff that Heidi covered in hers was really good because that kind of says what we do at the middle school. I get them all in 8th grade and 9th grade. So my presentation is more focused on things that I see, not just when they're young, but as they kind of move through, and kind of tips for clarinet specific things. So that's kind of me. So I visited with Jesse Krebs at Truman State. If you know him, he's awesome. Bring him in to work with your kids because he's awesome. And then Don Holt that used to teach here, and kind of compiled some ideas for starting these clarinet players. So you guys have done this before. Case on the floor, latches facing up. You've already got your clarinets together, right? So names of the pieces. I really believe in them knowing the names of the pieces. You guys probably go over the part names. Do you go over the part names as you're putting them together? So the bell, lower joint, and it's amazing how many different charts there are out there with different names. But lower joint, upper joint, barrel, mouthpiece, ligature, reed, knowing all of that. I think that it's good for them to kind of review that. Another idea I saw on one of the videos I watched was going through and having them actually pull them out and hold them up. Like, here's my barrel, here's the lower joint, here's the upper joint. Because there are places where, like, if you check out instruments to kids, they may be missing parts, right? So, which I had never even thought of. One of them I watched was a school that, like, they had pulled a barrel from another clarinet throughout the year and didn't realize they checked it out to a kid, the instrument out to a kid without replacing it, which I had never thought of. The other thing is taking those parts and making sure they know where they fit in the case, which I'm sure you guys do, but because it can be different depending on the case. There are times that I'm like, you kind of have to go through and make sure so that they don't completely smash everything when they put them in. So I liked those ideas. That's definitely stuff that I would do. You guys know how to put them together, but just kind of a reminder that this bridge key is super important and delicate. So if you push down on these keys, that lifts that key, right? And so lining it up so that it goes over top and doesn't catch is super important. I just had a kid send their instrument in because this was all bent and messed up. So making sure that that is raised is another good thing to tell them. So you guys know, the tricky thing with clarinet is that having them not grab, if you want to go down here to where there's not a lot of key work, you can think about having them close these pads. Is that how you guys do it? Mm-hmm. Having them close pads here and here. You run the risk of their fingers bending this rod still if they don't have enough cork grease on. So just be mindful of that. I feel myself kind of pushing here. So, but a general rule is to have them close those pads as they're putting that bell on. Any other questions? You guys have done that before.
I saw fingers on the rings. Is that okay?
I do fingers on the rings because I think that I actually kind of overlap a little bit when I do it because I feel like it spreads up the pressure. But you can do that in that way. If they can get a good enough grip on the back, I think that works. So, and then actually lining up the kind of brand name on it can help them as they're kind of lining stuff up as they go. You don't have to do that, but a lot of kids like that, especially clarinet players. They like order in their lives. Like seeing all of that. So
new clarinets are so hard to put together.
They are so hard
awful
to put together. So yeah, cork grease, and putting them together and taking them apart multiple times. Just do it over and over and over again until they're comfortable. It can get boring. I'm a big believer in rewards, stickers, little pieces of candy, even though we're not supposed to pass those out. Anything to like kind of make it fun and cutesy, and not boring per se. So those were kind of my notes on that. And I think key rings work. I think that works, and that would get you pushing this down as you lift up there. So that'd be good. Naming parts, cork grease. So generally speaking, you can put cork grease on while you're wetting your reed. Is that how you guys have done? have done that. Just kind of have that in your mouth as you go. Reed placement. So I would start with, if you want to go down here, to where there's not a lot of key work. I find mouthpiece and barrel. You said that's how you do it when you do your start part. Is that how you do it? You can do just mouthpiece, but I think it's hard to hold. I think this is easier to hold. It's also easier to see your angle, you know, and that kind of thing. So reeds, when you put those on, I know you guys know how to do this. Pulling that ligature up, kind of with your left thumb, and sliding this in, and my ligature is not ideal for that. But sliding it in to where you see just a little sliver of the mouthpiece at the top, and then tightening it. Alan, do you have yours on? Yeah.
Jamie, you're a person that likes to have the ligature on the mouthpiece first and then slide the reed in from the top? I mean, I'm with that too. But
I think that, especially with beginners,
I have people all the time that come to me, as a private student, have their reed on and then they put their ligature on over, which drives me crazy because I always think they're going to slice their reed.
I think
you
as
know?
beginners, I would definitely do this way.
Yeah.
Now, I don't police it with the 8th graders
Right.
and 9th graders, you know, and I'm really bad about smashing a reed. You know, I've done that many times. So I think with the beginners, sliding it in is probably, is that how you guys have done it? Probably both ways. Never thought about it.
Yeah, I never thought about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, especially for the young ones, because just like Mike said, I think that I have done it myself many times.
Yeah.
It's usually when I'm up in front of class and it's like, oh, that was my best read, you know, and giant chip in it.
Right.
So yeah, I think to start, as they get older, they will probably migrate from it, but I think that's good. And most of the ligatures that they're using will slide. This one's got kind of a metal piece in it that's a little weird, but those should slide. The libans, it should slide right in. So, yep. And there's just a little sliver of mouthpiece up above it, will generally work. So, mouthpiece and barrel is an F sharp, okay? It's a sharp F sharp. So I had to remind myself of that it's like, why am I so, but it is a sharp F sharp if they're doing it right. So, Al, you want to pull yours off too? You guys want to try the F sharp? You probably have done this with your kids. You're not going to do it. Okay, before we do it, we'll go ahead and talk about embouchure stuff. So I put a lot of notes on this, and feel free to ask questions. These are some of my favorite things that I've seen and that I use. The first one is milkshake face. Have you guys heard that before? Love the milkshake face. I think that and there's a link to this article. It's on that Band Directors Talk Shop website. But I think that's a really quick way, because it can get really technical really fast when teaching clarinet embouchure. I think if you use this analogy, it works really well. So if you tell them to think about having a big, thick milkshake, right, with the straw, and you're going to suck that big, thick milkshake. Okay? And think about making that face. That's going to automatically pull their chin down, put their corners in the right place. Okay? And tongue we'll talk about in a minute. So having them do that before they play, I think it looks really weird, right? Freeze their little milkshake face, right? Mike, have you used that before?
Oh, yeah.
I love that. So milkshake face, and then they can put it in. Okay? When you're looking at placement of the lower lip, you can slide a piece of paper between, oh, this is dangerous, this is a good read. I'm gonna do it. So I've got others. But you can slide a piece of paper between the reed and the mouthpiece. Very carefully. And you can see where they meet, that's where their bottom lip should be. So if you're kind of looking, if there's some weird things going on, that's a good way, kind of good tip to kind of check and see where that should be, okay? Another note I put on here, thinking about once they actually start playing, using the milkshake thing, you can say, if their corners are too tight, they're gonna crush the straw, right? So they're not gonna get any milkshake. Does that make sense? So I think that is a really easy way for kids that age to think about it, rather than, I know when I was in beginning band, it was like, keep a flat chin, and it was like too much to think about. And so, you know, it gets really overwhelming. So I think milkshake, a lot of people like milkshakes, right? And have had those. So, you ready? Allie, can I see your milkshake face?
No,
You're not doing it, you're just not gonna do it. Okay? So try it, and then we're gonna put these in and do it. Alright? That looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. Are you not doing it? Come on, you're gonna play clarinet. That was it. Okay? Lots of fast air. As you're checking embouchures, I'm guilty of this, of standing in front, walk around to the side. So like you're teaching a lesson, so why don't you guys do that again, and I'm gonna look at you from the side. Okay, ready? Those look awesome. They look awesome. You're just not,
It can't come out.
it didn't come out, we'll do it again then, if it didn't come out.
It won't come out.
Let me see, let me see.
Blow faster air like you're mad at somebody.
Yep. We don't have the best reader. That should work though. Try it again. Yep. Faster, sit up.
Nothing's coming out.
Ooh, that's sharp.
There you
Yeah,
go.
that sounded
Faster.
bad.
Now, teeth on top. Okay. Yep. Blow. Lots of air. Lots of air. That's it. That's it. Okay, hold it. Good. So you'll want to remind them to have teeth on top. There is such a thing as double lip embouchure, and how I don't teach that, but that's something that there are some people that think that is a thing to use. That's not not something that I use. So teeth are going to be on top. Okay. You can even think about if you've got a kid that's biting on the bottom, right, and then you can feel they're really tight. Maybe they're really sharp or getting the wrong note altogether. Think about having them give a little bit of top pressure from their top lip. So I don't know if you ever use that, but a lot of times people will have success with that. So they'll keep, and a lot of times they're tight here too, but if they think about pushing down this, a lot of times it'll loosen this up just a little bit, if that makes sense. Okay, so what else did I do? If the milkshake thing is weird, or if you have a kid that's not getting that, ooh or new is another really good, like ooh or new are the kind of syllables that I will use for that. Okay. Bottom lip over the teeth is one of the, I think it's one of the hardest things with clarinet embouchure, truly, is knowing how much of that bottom lip. So it's just gonna be just a little bit. If they're rolled all the way in, they're gonna really struggle, especially the higher they try to play. So then you wanna see just a little bit of that bottom lip when we're trying to do that, okay? Mirrors are good. You talked about having a mirror, taking the kids in the bathroom. If you've got mirrors in the room, it's good for them to see that. I do that still. I mean, no joke with myself. I mean, there are some times that I'm like, I feel tired. I feel like I'm doing something weird, and I'll look in the mirror, and you can see if you've got a bunchy chin, or if it's really tight here. So those work well. Embouchure buddies, I kind of read about that in an article, and I loved that idea. And maybe that's something that everybody has used. But parent kids up and saying, okay, I'm gonna do this. Now, take turns playing and kind of diagnose each other, and are you really playing with a flat chin, or are you, how your corners look? I like
That's
that
smart.
idea, especially if you've got a lot of kids, mixed instruments, that kind of thing. I think that works probably with any instrument, truly, but it can be a lot to check. So then, check embouchures from front and side. That was another one. Slide piece of paper. Okay, so tongue position when you're doing this should be he. Okay, a lot of times people, that's a common mistake I feel like when teaching clarinet, because it's probably maybe one of the only instruments where you think he, honestly, with your tongue. So what it does is raise the back of your tongue, right? And then you're gonna have kind of a dip that's gonna kind of create the tone quality, and then the tip is gonna be your articulator. Does that make sense? I need a picture of your tongue, but we can't see it, right? So that's the hard part, but thinking he it solves so many problems. It really just does. And you can do a lot of that with this, right? So, like I'm just moving my tongue, right? So I think demonstrating that to them, I think that'll make sense, and they can do it themselves, right? Another thing, I don't know if I put this on here or not, you can demonstrate is the angle. So this should be 45 degrees, right? When you put the whole clarinet on, I think about it, the bell coming to your knees. But you can check that very easily with just this. So having that check. Again, you can demonstrate what it would be for 90. You know what I mean? And so you can show them a lot and have them do it and see, ooh, they're gonna have very little control if they're coming here. So all of those things are good. And then you can do a lot of like call and response things with this. Kind of moving down. Yeah, I did put that on there, didn't I? The kind of a crazy document for a while, and I kind of tried to rein it all in. The other thing with this that was recommended to me was doing articulation, doing just a little bit, like you talked about with head joint. You can check articulation really easily without bringing this into the mix, you know, and we can't see the tongue. So thinking he, but then thinking about using just the tip of the tongue just below the tip of the reed, okay, just below. One good little exercise is this little tickle, the tongue tickler, as they call it. I kind of hesitated to Google that. On my school computer. But it really does, like, so the idea is that you put the mouthpiece in your mouth, put your tongue about here, and you're gonna blow just air. And so you feel the vibration of the reed, but you don't actually make sound. If you don't have sound, then you're suffocating the reed, it's not moving. Does that make sense? So the idea is that they're like tickling their tongue while they're doing it. But I'm just blowing air though. Okay, if they're pushing too hard, it's gonna stop the sound. So, again, this is kind of weird, but another idea I heard was a lot of times kids will put their tongue like further down, right? So having them just like physically think, okay, it's here, I'm like reaching, I'm looking for the tip. Well, like taking the time to find it, like what it feels like in their mouth. You know, like putting it in different spots. So you've probably heard of anchor tonguing, where you're tonguing further back with your tongue. We want to avoid that. You can see that a lot here. You know, if they're going guh, 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 you know, you can find it here too. And it's easier, I think, with this, you know, and staying on this, even doing a little bit of mouthpiece and barrel at the start of class, just for a couple minutes or a minute, it kind of, I think it reinforces those things, especially if you're seeing them every other day, you know. I think that helps too. And it doesn't have to take very long. But if there are any little weird habits that have creeped in, I think that's a good way to kind of find those. So I think that's it on, other questions, just feel free to ask. If I'm going too slow, too fast.
When I used to do those a lot, I'd have pitch all over the place for the kids at first. You know, and they couldn't get that F sharp, and some were just too like soggy. You know, it's too low. Do you have like ways? What are words you use when the kids are playing too low?
If it's too low, it is most generally tongue position.
Tongue position. Okay.
Yeah, it is most generally you want to think he and bring that up, and then faster air.
Okay.
Faster air. One of the I've read a lot of articles and watched videos and stuff, but one of the ideas was talking about airspeed and blowing out candles on, say, Allie's cake that has 11 candles on it
12.
versus Heidi's birthday cake that has more.
21.
You know, and yeah. But keeping that airspeed up, and then the high tongue position. And then they talked about like he and ha, like going you know, and kind of feeling the difference there. The air is very spread when you do the ha versus he.
Good.
So, which goes with the flat tongue.
Yeah.
Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So if you've got pitches that are all over the place, that's generally where I would start, is with the tongue position. And band directors are guilty a lot of times of saying, open your throat, open up, as a blanket statement to get bigger sounds, and that's exactly the opposite of what you want your clarinet players to do. You know?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I'm certain that I said that, you know, before I knew better, you know, even as a clarinet player. So just thinking, oh, I want bigger sounds, you know, and it really is not what you want the clarinets to do. So, all right, so we're gonna put the clarinet together. You guys have already put that together. We talked about putting it together several times. Let's talk about hand position. Just a little bit. I've played it all today, except for flute, not very well. All right, so, and this is, you guys know clarinet technique. It's like it's the woodwinds. There's so many little technical things. So hand position, C shape. I like the holding a cup like you talked about. Another one that I love is holding your fingers out and thinking about water dripping from your fingertips. If you've never used that one, because it relaxes you. Kind of has that relaxed C shape. That's one that I really like, and I still use even with big kids. You know, if they have really straight fingers or are tense, you know, it's very relaxed. So curved fingers that rest over the tone holes just like they do with the flute. The thumb rest is just in front of the knuckle on your thumb, right? So they'll develop those calluses. It's gonna be right in front. And this is a very common mistake. Kids will slide in too far. That's generally what it is. They're very rarely out here, but they'll usually come too far this way, right? Which crunches everything up here. Okay, so just ahead of that knuckle. I'm gonna make sure I fill my notes. So pinkies, I use kind of a home position. I don't know if you've ever done that. You guys probably, do you do that?
I haven't called it home, but.
Yeah, and you can call it whatever,
Yeah.
whatever works. Some people use stickers, whatever works for you. But the idea of keeping the fingers curved and close all the time. So we've got one over each. Now, when I do numbers, I do 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It doesn't matter, 1, 2, 3, 4. Just having a system it's very quick to tell kids fingerings if you have numbers, or a system that works for you. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then home position is basically a low E, right? So it's gonna be this inside left and then this bottom right up on top. Okay, so having them rest that there. Again, like the flute, not here, which you see a ton. Less here, but you definitely will see this, okay? Thinking about your left thumb, it points at 1 o'clock, if kids can read clock. Can kids read clocks? Can you read clock anymore? But if they can read a clock, pointing at 1 o'clock works because then they're gonna be able to play this too, right? So, I like the idea of angling at 1 o'clock. Does that make sense? That way that's in the right spot and we're not tilted here and then they have to awkwardly reach. So, but the idea of keeping these in that home position, then these are ready to play whenever they're called for as you go through, okay? Again, some people use stickers. That's not something I've done. I'm more of a label the fingering chart once you start working through kind of person. But whatever works. Everybody's situation's different. Kind of a troubleshooting thing, make sure that their right hand isn't resting on the bridge keys. You'll be able to see it because if they do it for very long, the finish will start coming off, right? But a lot of times, it's hard, it's heavy, right? And so their hand will come up even like this, and it's hard, like looking at it from here, like you may not even notice it if you're in front of them, but they'll do this and kind of rest here. So, and that'll slow them down in the long run, and it adds tension. So, keeping that off, that's another really common thing. This is a big one that I feel like wasn't covered a lot in my woodwind classes. Kind of like achieving balance, like you said with the flute. It's gonna be between your top teeth and your right thumb, right? So, kind of here. So, really, you should be able to pull it this way. Okay? And that's a really good way to make sure that they're getting that. You got it? Let me see your thumb. Is your thumb in the right spot? Looks pretty. Slide it over just a little bit, just ahead of it. There you go. Yeah, that looks good. And then if they can get that balance, it helps with so many things down the road. And you can check the angle at that point too, okay? Not everybody's gonna be exactly at this bell at the knees, but they'll come pretty close. So, kind of along the same idea of the balance, we talked about the open G not being ideal, because that's what you're trying, if you're just starting, this is a lot. It's a lot to balance. So starting, if you have the option to do that, it's tough if you've got a full group of kids in there. Starting with 1 and 2, or I'm sorry, thumb and 1 is how I would say that. We're automatically holding it kind of steady. All right, son, try it. And then you can check, okay, we're holding it still, okay? Then, are they resting fingers over the tone holes? Are we in a home position with our pinkies? Okay, check their thumb like I just did with her, that kind of thing. Does that make sense? Okay, so then E, then you can add D, right? Let's try D. Yeah, you guys sound good. You sound good. So then at that point, again, check, make sure this hand hasn't creaked up here. It is helping out. Okay, check for curved fingers. A lot of kids, and we want to play with the pads of our fingers, but a lot of times kids will look like this. Okay, do kind of the natural, like your hands will naturally curve, just in that C position, and we want that, okay? Even though we're gonna play with the pads of our fingers, we wanna maintain that curve. If you look at the clarinet, when they're holding it here, it should create a C position with their hand, right? Just like, do you do that with flute too, Heidi? Is that?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
it's the same.
It's all the
just-
same, yeah, with the woodwinds, it's that, yeah. So, E, D, and C, I think are really good first ones to start with. So, let's try C. You ready for C?
No.
So thumb, 1, 2, 3. You got it. Good, all right, ready? Yep, pinky's in. And then your right pinky's gonna go down 1 key, Allie. There you go. You slide up on your chair just a little bit, kiddo. There you go, because we don't want the clarinet to rest on the chair. I know. I know. All right, ready for C? That's it, play yours. Play your C. Oh, come on. Heidi will play her C. I played flute in the last thing. Oh, that looks really good. Are you lined up? Okay,
Am I not?
slide that over. So, this is something that Mrs. Heil should have caught earlier, but I didn't check. See how there's kind of a center on this? See how there are lines there? That guides to line up with this. He was off just a hair. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Brian, did you see
Yep.
that?
Yeah.
That'll help. And sometimes kids, if you don't catch some of that stuff early, they start to do this or, because they compensate.
Yeah.
So, cheers, Brian. You feeling brave?
Hmm.
You played lots of clarinet. Yeah, that looks awesome. See, everybody else plays, so you gotta get.
Yeah.
That was a good sound. See, Allie, yours is a little bit offset too. Okay, so we're gonna line these up, right? See how, see this little kind of post?
Yeah.
Okay, hold that. This is gonna line up with that. This is your little bridge. Can you see it from the side? We want it to line up perfectly with that. You wanna try again?
She's also got a lyre ring on there too.
She does. This is a very old, nasty plastic clarinet of mine. And we're getting her a different one for me. Yeah, that looks better. Try again. Try your C. Sit up tall. Good. And so her
Yeah.
first finger was off just a little bit, right? So just making sure that they've got pads of the fingers covering all of those tone holes. It's tempting to be like this, right? Flatten them out just a little bit. Okay, try again. They're not, honey, they're band directors. This is what we do. Sit up tall.
I'm gonna hear you like 1,000 times.
Sit up, sit up, sit up. You got it. You got it. Can you play lots of air, kiddo? All right, so if you're in a position to do that, that's a good way. It's just more stable than, guys know the G, or they're, it's a lot. All right, crossing the break and voicings, okay? This is obviously not like necessarily even, I guess it's very tail end of our first year, right? I mean, Ryan, you're probably in the same boat as us on crossing the break. Of course, I don't know what order your book is going in.
We just started it at the end of the year.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and that's
so
kind of
that's
where
what
we
we-
are. So this is gonna kind of go into some stuff that's past the first year, but I think it's helpful to know as you're starting kiddos. So, again, thinking he is a good idea. One of the biggest things I can tell people is, and I have a student that I worked with yesterday that I wish was sitting here, because we did this yesterday and she was a perfect model of it. Thinking he, but then pulling in and up on your right thumb. Okay, so we talked about that balance point between your teeth, right, and your right thumb. It's like you're sitting up taller when you do it. Like I have kids that'll play their chromatic scale and they get taller. Ideally, they would sit tall all the time, but they, as they go up and they play the higher notes or they play these jumps, they're sitting up just a little bit taller. And I had a kid in seventh going into 8th that was doing all the way up to the C sharp, and it works if you sit up tall and keep that air going. Okay, so if you're crossing the break, like just go, let's just do, what's a good one? Let's go low G, and then just add your extra key. Try A. Ha! Okay. Your embouchures look so good. They really do. They look good. This is another reward spot. Stickers and candy. Okay, Allie, are you not doing these?
I don't know those notes.
Oh, you don't know those notes yet, do you? I'm teaching to the teachers. Play. I bet you can play a low G.
Oh, I can't.
We'll work on it later. We'll work on it later. All right, you want to keep going? B flat. All right. Good. So sometimes you'll hear that little buzz and it doesn't come out right away. That's generally a tongue position or airspeed or both. Okay. Then this. Okay. Make them sit up tall. Okay. Now, anybody feel brave and want to play up to a high D with me? We're going to take it to the next level. So
High
B
D.
flat, register key. Okay. And then we're going to roll off the first finger, or you can lift it if that's too much. Okay. And we got to add the pinky. Remember high D? Anybody remember high D?
I don't know.
No.
Actually, go back to A. Go back to A. It'll be easy because you don't have to add the pinky. Go A, register key, and then lift.
It's like your second register key almost.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like
You
lifting
wanna try it?
weights or-
So it'll sound like this. You want to hear it once?
Yeah.
Well, that's what I just did. And don't squeak like me.
So
All
you do
right.
that A to E
So
then.
A, and then register key, and then just lift that first finger on your left hand. Yep. Yep. All right. Listen to that. Did you get it?
Yeah.
Nice. So, and a lot, like your sixth, seventh, really seventh grade. Seventh graders can do that. They really can once they're kind of into the year a little bit. So, they'll see it on my, I have a paper that I give them, and it's like, oh no, I haven't played that high. But then if you approach it that way, you can, basically what you do is start on the A, and then you can go up by half steps. So you go to your B flat. When you get to that D and everything above, that's where you have to have that pinky key. But it's the same, I mean, they'll understand it as A fingering, right? And then they pick up the process. And I have a paper with those listed if you want them. But they can do that earlier than you would think. So if they're set up right. So let's see. Only other thing I had on there was the third finger on the right hand can be difficult to keep covered. So, and that's, I like what you said about that going down and working that. There's definitely a school of thought that you need to start clarinets down low, rather, because if they're doing everything right down low, they'll be able to do everything. So, so then just some little, oh my gosh, I feel like this is going fast. Clarinet technique things, chromatic scale, teach chromatic fingerings, teach chromatic fingerings. That's my biggest plea, is no matter where you're teaching it, have them play the chromatic fingerings. And you have to be, like you were talking about it too, you just have to check it often. I am also a believer in marking on fingering charts. Just write anything you can on there. Fingering charts are helpful and not, because sometimes the stuff they give you isn't really what you're going to want to use. So I linked a fingering chart that I literally just circled chromatic fingerings on it. So, because that's what I do with my kiddos. I just go to the fingering chart and do it. But this is just a one-page thing. You can print it and give it to them. So if that's helpful. So that is on there. Those are just super important because it'll slow them down later on if they're not doing them correctly. So if I say chromatic fingerings, you know what I'm talking about. The B flat and then B natural. Okay, same thing with the register key. One note, and this is me personally, I don't ever teach this little banana key for the low E flat and the B flat. I don't ever use that. So I don't know, Mike, do you ever use that? I always just use the side. So some people always use this, so it's not one that I use. Up top, we use this one now. Okay. And then the F sharp is another good one. F here, bottom two bridge keys for the F sharp. Okay, so F sharp, G, which takes them a little bit longer because it's two bridge keys, but we don't want to go F to F sharp with the risk of that G popping out. So anytime they've got to move, we want to do this. And I remind 8th, 9th, 10th high school kids, it's just one of those things you have to remind them because they won't want to use it if they don't have to. So the only other thing, let's see, under clarinet technique, this is again marking the fingerings, but that home position is your low E, right? And so it can be helpful. In fact, I just wrote this in a kid's fingering chart yesterday to give them some sort of directions along with the fingering. So like as simple as lift left, outside left, and then lift both, or no pinkies, or you know what I mean? Kind of solidifying that pattern with your pinkies, because it applies with your first few notes, and then after the, you know, when you add your register key as well, it's the same pattern. Does that make sense? Did I go too fast? So low E, then you're gonna lift your left. F sharp is over here. Now you don't really, if you look at a fingering chart, they probably don't have this colored in for your F sharp, because you don't need it, it's already down. But I think for kids that are starting, leave it down, it's already there, and it makes sense to them. It's one less thing to move, if that makes sense. So together, lift left, outside left, and then lift them both before we go to that. So writing those directions in does work. So it sounds cumbersome, but it really will make sense to them. So, and then you can practice it. Or in half notes, you know, go as slow as you need to, but just to where they get that muscle memory going through there, okay? Questions on that, chromatic? Okay, and then if you look at that chart and it doesn't make sense, let me know. It's possible I marked something weird on that. Just some other little clarinet specific things. A lot of times it can be hard for kids to know which fingering to pick on things, right? Because it's like, well, I don't know, there's 3 different ones on the chart here and that kind of thing. So this article was on Band Directors Talk Shop. I love that website. But the first one was don't slide, right? So pinkies, with the exception of one, have alternates, right? So if they're trying to do this, we don't want them to do that. So the hard part with like beginner instruments is sometimes that low E may not speak without this down with it. So that you will run into a little bit of that too. Or if they're a little bit out of adjustment, sometimes you do have to add those little helper keys. So if you can avoid it, don't slide. Teach them to look for those alternates. Don't flip. That's going to be your B flat to B natural, right? Your F to F sharp, those kinds of things. The A flat / E flat key is king, so that's going to be this one, right? So if you've got a passage that involves this and a bunch of other notes around it, you start here. You kind of talked about that with the flute. You start here and then you work your way back, okay? And then you have the kiddos pick up their pencils and you put R, L, R, or L, R, L. Have them get in the habit of writing that up above so that they kind of know, okay, this is, if it's there, they'll start to use it. So teaching them that they'll start to do it on their own. So law of minimal motion is, okay, so one of the examples I saw was if you're going from G to F sharp to G, use the front finger, don't use your chromatic where you have to push 3 keys down, just use the front. So that's a good rule to tell kids as they're kind of making choices. I feel like this is a lot of information. Last kind of clarinet specific thing is the rocking motion to that throat tone A, right? So rock to the first knuckle of the index finger, okay? No hopping. I like that word, hopping, right? So it's amazing how many kids, and they can hide it really well. You'd be amazed. Some of them will just, but they have to literally, they're picking up their finger, and it slows them down. So they should be able to kind of keep this finger still over that tone hole, rock up with that first knuckle to play the A. Does that kind of make sense? You guys probably already know this. Just up to that first knuckle is and check it often, because it's amazing how quickly they'll jump into, I've got some high school kids that I know will, it's like, oh, it slows you down, okay? The other thing when you're doing that, a lot of times they'll sneak their thumb down here. So checking from all angles is a good thing too, because if they're doing the A, they feel like they need something to balance the clarinet. So that's another good one, okay? Super quick, end of class care. Reeds should come off the mouthpiece daily. I just talked to a now freshman that said, oh, I should do that. Talk to him about mold, you know how that goes. every day. Clarinet swabs, one thing to think about with those that a lot of people may not realize is, especially with those beginning ones, I don't have a really stiff one, but I have a silk one, but a lot of the ones that come in beginner instruments are kind of cloth that is really stiff and hard to manipulate. Having them take it a joint at a time, rather than just through the whole thing and then having it get stuck, because there's a piece inside here, I'm sure you've discovered that. You had to cut swabs out, I'm sure, you had to do that, it's fun times. But when you put those in, you can show them, and this is not gonna catch, because it's one of the silk ones, but you can have them pulling in a little bit, and then out a little bit. Then in a little further, then out a little bit, and kind of smooth it out, if that makes sense, so that it doesn't get completely jammed in there like they can. I'm sure
Smart.
you've cut out many of those.
Yeah.
Right? But I never thought, oh, I should have them like understand how this works and, kind of manipulate that as it goes through, so. Last idea I saw that I've seen a couple of times that I don't really do with the 8th grade, I guess I probably should, is like a maintenance Monday type idea where you go through and check reeds. Make sure the reeds aren't on their mouthpieces when they come in the room. Check the quality of the reeds that they're playing on. All of those things, that works for every instrument, really. There's probably things that, grease the corks, all of that kind of.
How do you talk to them about rotating reeds?
I don't talk to them a whole lot. Do you? How do you present it?
I don't.
So with my big kids, we talk about numbering them, because a lot of them don't have these,
Right.
but I'll have them number on the back and say, play this one for a little bit today, and then work yourself to the next one. They don't always do it.
Yeah, right.
But, with the older kids, once they get these, it becomes very easy, I think, but then it's hard with those little briefcases. Yeah.
Totally.
So.
Totally.
The last thing are just some little mouthpiece patches are awesome. The thick rubber ones though, those are the ones that I like. Pencil grippers for the thumb rests are good because it hurts when they're first learning. It really does. So those little pencil grippers work well. And then the Lomax, you guys have the Lomax Prelude, right? And that's a great mouthpiece. So the Van Dorens, the B45, the 5 are the good ones too. But I play on a Lomax mouthpiece, not that one, but I play on a Lomax. They're really kind of the good one right now that we like. So, what questions do you have? I feel like I was just talking there. Did that help a little bit?
When do you change mouthpieces for them? When do you think, hey, it's time to move from the Lomax or the 5RV Lyre or whatever up? Do you have a, 8th grade you try to get them to?
It's usually my
Which
high
one?
school kids and
Okay.
the ones that are studying.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't usually move them and pass, unless they're with, taking lessons.
Sure,
That's
sure.
usually when we
How
go.
about reed strength? When do you recommend they go from that 2.5 that they start with to the 3 to the 3.5?
They're in 3s when they come to me, generally.
Oh, cool.
Yes.
So by end of 7th grade, they switch to 3s. 3.5s I will go to with my kids that are playing quite a bit.
Mhm.
Generally, most of our high school kids, well, they'll stay on 3s unless they're in lessons. 3.5s they'll switch to if they're playing, they're doing auditions and doing that kind of thing. We don't usually go past that.
Gotcha. Cool.
So.
Good to know.
Yep.
Great stuff, Jamie.
That help?
Yeah.
I hope that was helpful.
This is very helpful.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank
Good,
you so
good.
much.